Hi, it's Drew Blazsik, and in this video, we're going to talk about international trade and doing the SIM method and imports and exports. Let's get straight to it. Here's the Excel file. Make sure you download it right below. What we have, this is important. We have U.S. supply, U.S. demand. That's U.S. suppliers, U.S. consumers. And if we didn't have free trade, what this is showing is we have a domestic price of $10 and a domestic quantity of 8. I have the world price and the tariff up here. What we want to do is we want to answer the questions. If the world price is $4, so we want to see what happens in this impact, what we're going to do. And just so you know, this is dynamic, as in you could change that value if you wanted to, and it will self-correct, auto-adjust, and you can play around with it and see if you can get the correct answers. Okay, so we have, let's say it's $5. I'm going to go all the way down, and let's put the world price at 5 right here. And what that is going to be, that's the world price. And we were at 8, or we're at 10. So what's happening is that we're opening our markets up to China, cheaper manufacturing, cheaper labor, and that comes in cheaper goods for people in the United States. But what it hurts a certain group of people, which is going to be the actual producers in the United States. So let's see what happens here. If the world price is 5, what is our domestic demand of quantity? So if we were closed to free trade, we are producing 8. Now we're open to free trade, so you got the world price, and you want to go all the way at a lower price. Our demand curve is saying we want 13 units. So that answer is going to be 13 quantity. We were at 8, but cheaper prices, people demand more. Domestic supply quantity. We were producing 8 units supply. However, at a lower price. Law of supply says our U.S. firms don't find it profitable to utilize the resources and other things. Therefore, they produce less, and that's right about $3. Is this an example of exports or imports? If the world price is below the domestic price, that would be an example of imports. Therefore, how many units are being imported in for this example? Well, if we were producing 8 domestically, now we have a world price. Now it goes all the way down, and now we were demanding 13. However, we are only supplying 3. Therefore, we must, in order to keep up with demand, we are producing 3, and we still have 10 that must be imported in. It's the difference between quantity demanded and quantity supplied. Now we're going to calculate what is the consumer and producer surplus if there is no free trade. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to, and I'm going to draw this on here, we want to find out if there's no free trade, what is the consumer surplus? By definition, everything underneath the demand curve above the price. So this is going to be consumer surplus. And what does that mean? It's almost like the benefit of what we're willing to pay and what we do pay, right? The demand curve shows how much we're willing to pay for each specific unit, and the price is what we're paying, $10. Therefore, if we want to add it all up together, what we're going to do is do the triangle equation. I have to know the height of this triangle, which is the very top is 18 minus 10, so that's going to be 8. Our quantity is 8, so it's going to be 8 times 8. And then to find the triangle, if it's not a rectangle, we want to multiply that times 0.5. Producer surplus. Now, producer surplus is going to be everything underneath the price and above the cost. Our cost curve is our supply curve. So this is what it costs in a specific unit, and then the price is what they receive. So the difference between that is the surplus per unit. And if you want to find out how much is surplus of all units, you add up, you calculate the triangle. And again, so for example, if I want to find the surplus for the 8th unit, well, we're receiving $10 and it costs us 10, so it's 0. And then every other unit will have a gap between what we cost us and what we actually receive, and that's the benefit or the surplus. Let's do the math here. The height is $10 price. It goes all the way to 2, so that height is 8. The width is 8. It's 8 units, and then it's times 0.5. Total surplus is just consumer surplus plus consumer surplus plus producer surplus. So I'm going to hit, for some reason it's not working here, alt equals. So I'm going to sum up those two values. So we have a total surplus of 64. All right, next, consumer surplus, world price at $4. So we're going to maintain, well, let's put it at 5. Again, this is robust. You could change any price and it'll calculate it for you. So let's look at the erase. I'm going to erase this stuff. So what we're looking at, the world price is at $5. Now let's calculate what the surplus is. Well, the consumer surplus is everything underneath the demand curve and above the price, right? We're paying the price, that's our cost. And our demand curve is what we're willing to pay. So, however, we're at the world price. So our consumer surplus, here's the price we're paying, $5 for all units. All the way there. And look, that's where the demand curve connects with the price. So what we want to know is this entire area. That's now the consumer surplus. Sorry for that weird looking C there. But everything that's over the price and underneath the demand curve. That's the benefit of having it for $5. This is what we're willing to pay. So let's find out what this is. So the height of it goes up to 18 and has a price of 5. So that's going to be 13 times the width. Well, we have 13 units and then times 0.5. So as you can see, consumer surplus was 32. We imported goods in. And now what we have is consumers are benefiting because it's a cheaper price. Much cheaper. Now let's look at producer surplus. Producer surplus is everything over the underneath the price they receive and above the supply curve. So that's going to be our producer surplus. So let's make sure we calculate it, see how it shrunk. Before we had underneath the $10 price, now we're down to 5. And you got to look at the supply curve of US. All this is imported, so they don't benefit from that. So let's look at what it would be. We have a width of 2, right? They're producing, I'm sorry, 3. That'd be 3 units. Multiply it times, well, $5 price, it goes all the way to 2, so that's another 3. If you notice, I made it very simple with the math. 0.5. So that's going to be 4.5 producer surplus. It once was 32, and it dropped down a lot lower. Total surplus, so say all equals. This is important to see what happens here. All right, let's go through this. Imports, if the world price is below the domestic price, that means we are going to import in. If we import in, consumers win, producers lose. But this is important, as you see, total surplus actually went up. So consumers won more than the loss of producers. Total surplus increased. That's important to see. All right, so next, let's do an example of free trade, a world price above the domestic price. In our example, we're going to say $13. So I'm going to take that world price. I'm going to put it up to 13 and make sure I bring that up with us. All right, the world price is 13, and then what you want to do is there's a supply curve, there's a demand curve. As you see, we're not at equilibrium. Now we can calculate it. Domestic demand at higher prices. Price goes up. We wanted 8 units. Now we want 5 units. So as you can see, it went down. So we have 5 units. Domestic supply, it was at 8. However, at a higher price, they're willing to supply more. They're willing to move the resources to produce this good because it's gaining more money. And that's at 11 units. If the world price is above the domestic price, this is an example of exports. How many units are being exported? Well, that's going to be the difference between what is supplied and what is demanded domestically. So that's going to be 11 minus 5. So we're exporting. So we're producing 11. Only domestically 5 are being sold. That means we're going to export 6 to the world. And now what we want to know is what is the consumer producer surplus? What is the world price or surplus at a world price of 13? So I'm not going to color it in, but I'm going to show on here. So if that's the world price, consumer surplus is going to be this triangle, right? Underneath the demand curve up to the price. You see it stops at 5 units. So we want to calculate that. So that's going to be a height of, goes up to 18, 13. So that's a height of 5. Multiply it times a width of 5. Again, it's very simple math I have here. Multiply it times 0.5. So consumers dropped from 32 to 12.5. And now you see what producers. Producers now get to make more. So we're going all the way up to there. Now that is going to be the entire producer surplus. As we see, if we export goods out, it's going to grow, which is a good thing for firms. So that's going to be equal to, well, it's a height of 13, then we got 2, so that's going to be 11 multiplied times 11 times 0.5. 60.5, total surplus is 73. Let's talk about this. If the world price is above the domestic price, it benefits producers and it consumers are worse off. But however, it benefits producers more than it hurts consumers. So total surplus increased from 64 to 73. All right, last example we'll do is a little more complicated here. We're going to do a tariff. A tariffs work when it's imported in. So let's look at this example here. Okay, here's an example of free trade, world price plus tariff. So we're going to do a domestic price of 5 and a tariff of $3. So let's show you how to work this out. So I'm going to take that world price, put it at 5, and we'll move this down here, right? That's the world price. And then what we're putting on, and what is a tariff? Tariff is a tax on all imported goods. That's a $3 tariff. So what we do is we take this tax down here. It's at 5, so we're going to put this at 8. It's 5 plus 3. And then this is going to be the tariff or the tax. Okay, so we have a lot going on. I'm going to draw and I'm just going to outline it and try to make this make sense the best as possible here. So we want to know is if we put a world price of 5 and then we come in and we're going to tax all imports to $3, that makes the price of our goods coming in, or actually that the price of this domestically was $10. Well, now we have the world price. We have to compete to $5, but the tariff goes to $8. So we want to know, what is our domestic price now? Well, that's going to be the $8 in that example. So we'll put down 8. What about U.S. demand? How much are we demanding at $8? What you want to look for is that tariff. That's the tariff plus the price. You want to look at it right here. Right? That's the demand. At that price, U.S. consumers are willing to pay 10. Oh, my computer kind of slowed down there. Okay, so we got 10 units. What is supply? And I just want to show this. Before the tariff, we were supplying 3. Now we raise the price with the tariff. That means U.S. producers are saying we can compete now. We can produce it. It's worth selling it for 8. We're not getting taxed. Foreigners or foreign companies are. Now they're going to be producing 6 units. How many units are now being imported? Just look at it. Before, this was 3, this was 13, and this example, it was 10 being imported in. Now it's going to be right here, which is 6. Domestically, we're going to supply. However, we're demanding 10, so that's going to be 4. 4 will be imported in. We're producing 10, right? I'm sorry, we're demanding 10. We only can produce 6. That means the rest must be imported in. All right, next, we want to find out, what is the tax revenue? I'm going to draw this out here. How much, now you probably could see it without looking on the graph. I'm going to draw it off to show it. Well, if we're importing in how many units? 4, and it's going to be how much? $3 a tax. So that's going to be, tax revenue is 3 times the 4. So tax revenue we're raising is $12. I'm going to show you where it looks like on this map here, or on this graph, is, right, this is the domestic. Try to draw this right now. So it's going to be right at the price. Oh no, it's just moving it. Hold on 1 second. So we look at the quantity there. That's going to be the tax rate at the 6 units. And then we look at right here, that's how much is getting imported in, 6 to 10. And then the vertical aspect is the actual taxes. So if I draw this little rectangle, that's the tax revenue. That would be that area right there. Now that does not, if you know deadweight loss, the definition of deadweight loss is once was surplus, now is not because of a tax. Tax revenue is not deadweight loss. That's going somewhere. Deadweight loss is where it disappears. It once was surplus and now it's not. So make sure we understand that tax revenue is not deadweight loss. Now what we want to do is, what is our consumer surplus? Well, our consumer surplus, let's try to outline it. It's going to be above the price. So I'm just going to go on that tariff, that green line. It's above the price, all the way over, underneath the demand curve. So this is going to be consumer surplus. What do we have a width of? I have a width of, right, that's 10 units. We're at a price of 8. It goes all the way to 18. So that's going to be 10 times 10. I like how those numbers perfectly work out. But so we have consumer surplus of 10 times 10 triangle. So it's times a half. We have consumer surplus of 50. You can see it went down from, if you did, well, this is at a different, or $5, same thing. It went from consumer surplus of 84.5 down to 50, so we do lose some value to consumers. Now look at producer surplus. Remember how small it was before? Producer surplus now, before it looked like this, that area. Now they can sell for a higher price. Now it's this area. right underneath the price, which is the $8, and above the supply curve. So what do we have? We have 6 units. That's 6 for the width, right? Going across, that's the units. And that's going to be multiplied times the price of 8 goes down to 2. So 6 times 6 times a half. So equals 6 times 6 times 0.5. All right, now what we want to do is let's calculate what is the dead weight loss. And if you didn't see it on the screen, so I did 6 times 6 times a half. And that's the height of the triangle times the width times the half. All right, what is dead weight loss? Once was surplus. Now, if I could draw this to show it, right? Remember, originally consumer surplus was at the world price. It's hard to see. It's right here. So it is at the world price. It was all this area. Now it's switched. Producer surplus took that area that they took was once owned by consumers, now is not. However, we do got the tax revenue. That's not going away. That's not dead weight loss. But if you see there's an area, a triangle here, that once was consumers without the tax. And then you have this area is a triangle. Once was consumer surplus before the tax. Now it's gone. And what that is, that's called dead weight loss. And what we would do, want to calculate that, we have a width. You can see that producers once were at 3 units. Now they're at, it's that width. Now they're at 6. So it's going to be 3 units. It's going to be 3 units width. That's going to be the height of the tax, which is 3. Now let's look at this triangle here. This one's a height of 3. This is at 10, right? I'm going to draw that line going down. That's 10. The end of this is 13. So that's 3. So they're the same size triangle. So the reason why I show that, if they're the same size triangle, all you have to do, instead of doing the half, pretend it's a rectangle. So that's 3 times 3. Right? If they were different size triangles, you have to do each one. For example, the first one was 3 times 3 times 0.5. And then you would have to say plus the next triangle, which is the same, 3 times 3 times 0.5. So there you go. That's the dead weight loss. Dead weight loss, again, by definition, dead weight loss is once was surplus, now is not. That's the video of international trade. Any questions, please send me a message. Hopefully that makes sense. It's dynamic, as in you could change those values and you could solve it. If you make the price equal to equilibrium, the answer would be equilibrium if you type that in. But playing around with it, just try to make sure it's below or above when you do it. That's it. Any questions, let me know, and God bless.